You're listening to Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan.
Welcome to Women's Media Center Live. I'm Robin Morgan. What a show we have for you today. Did you ever think that Julia Ward Howe, who was the author of the lyrics to the Battle Hymn of the Republic, was a militant suffragist coming out of a dreadful marriage? Well, I didn't know that, but her biographer, the prize-winning author Elaine Showalter, is with us today, a new book that she's just come out with. And then we go to the Pacific Islands. We caught Dr. Hilda Heine, who is the president of the Marshall Islands, when she was in town at the UN to sign the climate accords passed in Paris. And last, we'll touch base with the blogger named Scicurious, Bethany, Brookshire, who has a huge following for translating science into the fascinating, accessible subject she makes it to be. But first, we need to go inside the headlines. As the high-ranking Nazi propagandist Goebbels knew, you not only need to make a lie big, but you need to keep telling it repeatedly over and over and over to make it stick. That's been done with Hillary Rodham Clinton and the myth of her being crooked or untrustable for decades now. And Donald Trump has revived it by branding her Crooked Hillary. So it's important to counter with a few, you should excuse the word, facts and truth. Jill Abramson, the former editor-in-chief of the New York Times, who herself spent decades as a journalist investigating Clinton, or overseeing investigations of Clinton, and she certainly has not a record being soft on either of the Clintons. She recently wrote a piece for The Guardian in which she said flat out, Hillary Clinton is fundamentally honest and trustworthy. Not only that, but the Pulitzer Prize-winning fact-checking website, PolitiFact, P-O-L-I-T-I-F-A-C-T, PolitiFact, calculated that of the various Clinton statements it has examined, which is a huge amount of them, 95% are either true or mostly true. This is more than twice as high as the percentages for statements by any of the other candidates. Sanders got 46%, Trump got 12%, 23% was for Ted Cruz, and 33% for John Kasich. So this is an unusual situation where we actually have a metric among the candidates, and it tells us that contrary to popular impressions, Hillary Rodham Clinton is more honest and trustworthy than any of her peers. And in fact, one of the transcripts from the infamous Goldman Sachs speeches, which I remind you, Bill Clinton and Colin Powell and other prominent figures had been making for comparable amounts of money, so she probably naively thought that a woman could do the same, but all different rules for different strokes for different folks. Anyway, one of the speeches has actually been leaked, and it's online. It's at the Daily Kos, www.dailykos, DAILYKOS, and you just go to that website and type in her name and speech, Hillary Clinton, Goldman Sachs, and it's better than a transcript, although it has the transcript. It's an actual video in which she talks about making loans to women, employing women. She talks about, quote, women are a really good risk to lend to, and there are still too many financial institutions that either don't know that or don't believe it. Women need to be able to start their own companies, and women and people of color are the focus of her speech, which of course is, what is wrong with that? While we're on the subject, by the way, in terms of women and money, a recent study just released by McKinsey and Company was reported in the Minneapolis Tribune and sent in by one of our most loyal listeners, finding that gender parity, or paying women equally to men, isn't just fair, it's actually an economic growth accelerator. Yeah. We've known this anecdotally for decades, and now we have the studies to prove it. Across 95 countries that they studied, the U.S. being the most gender equal, but even here, the study found it's a $2.1 trillion opportunity, a 10% increase in U.S. gross domestic product. That is the equivalent of the GDP of the state of Texas. Companies can add 1 percentage point to operating profits when they increase management diversity by 10%, adding 1 woman or a person of color for every 10. So when Hillary went to Goldman Sachs to tell them the truth about women and money and investing in women, that was not a bad thing. Nor is she crooked Hillary. But those who accuse her of it, a little bit bent. In fact, I think I'm going to name that whole group something like the Electoral Industrial Complex. Yeah, how do you like that? I would include in that the commentators and the pundits and especially the video makers, the manufacturers of stickers and buttons and T-shirts, and the writers and recorders of radio commentaries and radio commercials and posters made and highway signs, and the advisors and the script writers and the professional tweeters and posters and social media whizzes. I mean, all of them, a huge electoral industrial complex that makes their living off our choosing representatives for ourselves in our republic. And for them in the electoral industrial complex, truth is not necessarily a priority. And there are special rules for women and other have-nots in money, as we've seen, in pay, in coverage in the media, and in general treatment. Of course, when you complain about that, if you're a woman, they say, you're playing the woman card, as, of course, Donald Trump did recently about Hillary Rodham Clinton. Well, I'll get to the woman card in fighting words. But for now, you know what? Truth is necessarily a priority. And now it's time for my first guest. Elaine Showalter is the Emeritus Professor of English at Princeton University. She's a scholar, a great expert on English and American literature with a particular passion for feminist criticism. She's written 10 books, and she's here today with us to talk about the most recent one, The Civil Wars of Julia Ward Howe. Dr. Elaine Showalter, welcome to the program, Elaine.
Thank you so much.
You created really the field of gyno-criticism, of looking at women's literature with a feminist eye, and the woman as writer with all of that goes into that. And you've done some amazing work, not the least of which is this new book, the first biography to give us back Julia Ward Howe, who the world knows as the author of the lyrics of Battle Hymn of the Republic, but I never really, and I studied the suffrage movement, I never realized until this book how much of a feminist pioneer she was, and I certainly didn't know that she had such pitched battles on the home front with a dreadful husband.
Yeah, I mean, of course, people covered it up, and her daughters wrote the first biography, which was published exactly a century ago. So it was really important for me to have mine come out. You know, it came out in March 2016. The first one came out in March 1916 by the daughters, and it won the first Pulitzer Prize for biography. And it's actually a wonderful biography. But, of course, they were very concerned to make everything look as nice as possible, to gloss over the difficulties in the marriage. And also because they were the children of that marriage and had a very happy childhood, they couldn't really believe it.
Right.
So it's a story that, you know, I thought needed to be told for this century.
Oh, my God, yes. And, you know, what's incredible is that I mean, this was not just a bad marriage, which would be difficult enough. He was physically, verbally, emotionally abusive. This is a story that reminds me in its tone of Charlotte Perkins Gilman, the Yellow Wallpaper. Yeah. I mean, she wrote in 1865, She wrote, I have been married 22 years today. In the course of this time, I have never known my husband to approve any act of mine which I myself valued. Books, poems, essays, everything has been contemptible or contraband in his eyes because it was not his way of doing things. Oh, my God!
No, it's a very strong statement. And yet I have to say they had 6 children. They were not a good team, but they were great parents. It was a terrible marriage, but they were terrific parents, and they got together on that. And he was, what's really sad about it is that he was an exceptional man. He was really a remarkable person for the 19th century, and they should have been a terrific partnership. But the irony is that this man who was progressive about everything, who was one of the leading abolitionists,
right,
who, led the education of the blind and deaf, who was active for prisoners, for the insane, everything that you could imagine in the 19th century, the only thing that he opposed was women's rights.
Well, it reminds me of, frankly, the left in the 1960s and the early 70s. I mean, where and I could even make some analogy with the elections today, where the right opposes women frontal assault, and the left says, no, we're all for you, but don't be divisive because your issues. Not realizing that all issues are women's issues. Your issues are not as important as those that we, the guys, deem important. So in a sense, he was a principled man, but he also wasted her inheritance, and he refused to. He not only didn't support her writing, he tried to, squelch it utterly.
Absolutely.
And it's extraordinary. It's just extraordinary, and I'm so grateful to have this. Artifact that you brought her back to us, because I, of course, never thought of her as, I knew she was vaguely active in the women's movement at that time, but I didn't think of her as much of a figure as she was. I mean, and thankfully, being the author of the Battle Hymn of the Republic changed the power imbalance in the marriage, drove him nuts, but it gave her a little bit of leverage, didn't it?
It gave her a lot of leverage. It gave her confidence. And, of course, when she wrote it, she had been asked by her minister, who was somebody she greatly admired, was also a friend. He said to her, I think you should write a better lyric to this tune of John Brown's Body. You could do better than this. So it was not only that he gave her permission, in a way he commissioned it.
Right.
And in that sense, she felt, okay, it's right for me to do this. And she really let herself go. Yeah. And I think that was a tremendous moment for her, a real turning point for her. And after the Civil War, one of the things that's really surprising is that when you consider that the Battle Hymn is quite a bloodthirsty anthem, she became a pacifist after the Civil War.
Interesting. She also published a book called Passion Flowers. Tell us about that. That sounds extremely interesting. I mean, Hawthorne, some major literary figures thought that she was a quite substantive poet until Hawthorne realized that my God, these men, the content of the book was highly critical of marriage. And then he said she, a scribbling woman, and she hasn't any genius, and she ought to be whipped for having published these details about the marriage. But that book is nowhere available, I'm sure.
No, it's out of print. And, to tell the truth, it's not overall that remarkable as a book of poetry. It has in it a couple of remarkable poems. And I think she was... I think it's a terrific first book of poetry, and I think she had a lot of talent and a lot to say. But his reaction to that book, and the reaction of people like Hawthorne, and even some of the people, who were allegedly friends of hers in Boston, was very chilling. And she didn't develop as a poet, and she knew it. She realized it. But happily, after the Civil War, she found her vocation, and she realized what she really could do is speak. She could campaign. She could work for the women's movement, and that was a very, very happy choice for her.
But what's wonderful is that when he does finally die, and she's released from this imprisonment, at what she called his coarse and irrational violence. God, she blossoms,
and she had 6 children.
Yeah,
it wasn't until after she'd had the last children and her last child sadly died. Just after the Civil War, so that was a tragedy. But it also meant the end of childbearing, and she discovered in the women's movement, among other things, the companionship of women.
Yes,
and it's very touching to me, and moving to me when she finally says, I'm going to do this, and she goes out on the road. Often with Mary Livermore, who was a suffragist from New England, and they made a terrific team. And she just loved it. She said they would travel. They didn't care how cold it was. They didn't care how terrible the hotel was, how awful the dinner was, how hostile the audience was. It was that kind of. It was the comradeship, the sisterhood of suffrage.
Yes.
And for her, it was. She says it was like discovering a new continent.
Yes. Oh, this is a lovely, lovely book. Your scholarship, of course, is staggering and award-winning, and justly so. It's called The Civil Wars of Julia Ward Howe, a biography. Thank you for writing it, Elaine.
Thank you so much, Robin.
It's time for a short break here at Women's Media Center Live. I'm Robin Morgan, but I'll be right back with the first woman president in the Pacific, one of thousands and thousands of islands, the Marshall Islands in this case, who are on the front line fight against climate change because they're facing something called king tides. Don't go away.
You're listening to Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan.
Welcome back. Imagine what it's like to become the first woman president of one of the small Pacific island nations, of which there are 10,000 islands in the Pacific, and they're all on the front line fighting climate change. And there you are, and you're in New York City to sign the Paris Climate Accords, and we catch up with you. That's what happened with Dr. Hilda Heine, president of the Marshall Islands. Here she is. President Hilda Heine, welcome. Yokwe Jola. That I probably have mispronounced it, but I understand that's welcome, friend.
Yes, you're right, Robin. Welcome, Tara.
Welcome, Jala. All right. Well, you are very welcome, and I'm grateful to you for joining us on this hectic trip of yours. I know that you're here as president of the Republic of the Marshall Islands to participate in the United Nations signing of the Paris Accord on climate change, because yours is the third country to ratify very quickly the agreement, along with Fiji and Palau, other island nations in the Pacific. Congratulations and bravo.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Your country was put on high alert recently for widespread king tide inundation. And that itself was just after a state of disaster that you had to declare, responding to worsening drought conditions that were threatening to leave the capital, Majuro, without any fresh water supplies in less than 3 months' time. Tell us about the high king tide warning and the drought situation.
As island country, Marshall Islands is only 2 meters above sea level, and so we're prone to high tides. And lately, the king tide has been coming more often than before, or at least in more ferocity than it used to be. And so we've been, the island has been inundated with water over several times this past year. And then this year we've had an extended drought, I think since December until now. Some of the northern islands haven't received one drop of rain in the past months. And so the issue of safe drinking water is really the one that we're having to deal with. because these other islands are isolated. Of course, there are no rivers and all we have to depend on in these communities are well waters. And in some cases, the well water are salty, again from sea level rise, contaminating the drinking water.
Oh my God!
So the government has had to look for resources. We've declared disaster in order to get the assistance from donor partners, so that we can dispatch reverse osmosis units to these communities. And so as we speak, about 15 of the communities have RO units that are supplying up to 300 gallons a day for drinking waters. And so this is helping to relieve that pressure. But there are still communities, not without reverse osmosis units, so they're still having some issues, and we're still trying to make sure that we can get more of these units to these communities. And in the urban centers, Majuro and Ebi, where most of the populations are located, we're having water distribution centers in different communities, so that water can be trucked to these distribution center, and then people go there and collect their waters. So it's been a lot of logistical, work, and also resource intensive in order to try to get these done.
Of course, you and other island nations are on the front lines of climate change, of course. And just so the listeners understand the complexity of the situation you're facing, the Republic of the Marshall Islands is spread out over 29 coral atolls, comprising 1,156 individual islands and islets. And also, you have survived. Oh my God! The islands were colonized by Micronesians in the second millennium BCE, before the Common Era, and then came the Europeans in the 1520s, and the Spanish, and then the British with John Marshall, for who carries the Western name, and then the Spanish again, and then the German Empire, and then the Japanese, and then the United States conquering Japan in World War II. To survive all of this and nuclear testing, my God, President Heine, and now to face climate change, how do you do it?
It's not easy, as you know, and, reading the history of the Marshall Islands, it's been one of, people struggling to survive. If it's not from force of nature or natural causes, then it's, man-made, really man-made issues that have been brought to us. Nothing that we've really asked for, but we have to deal with. So we have the nuclear testing program in the 1940s and 50s that have until today displaced many people from their homes. And when we talk, it's not just about displacing people from homes, but it's about their culture, their identity. Of course. When they're uprooted from their homes, they lose their culture, because land is really part of the culture, and when you're not on your own land, you've lost your culture.
Yes, and
so that's
and health issues in the wake of testing as well.
And then that's one of the health causes of the nuclear legacy, not just the displacement and the loss of culture, but health. We have one of the highest incidences or rates of NCDs, or non-communicable diseases, in the world, I think, at the moment, or if not in the Pacific. So one of my goal is to really try to see if we can reduce the NCD rate. But all of this, a lot of it is cancer, and most of the cancer are related to the nuclear. Of course, radiation.
That's a tragic legacy that keeps on going. It's ghastly. And in the face of all this, you've managed to be a shark sanctuary as well, which moved me so much. I mean, imperiled as the islands are themselves, you've reached out to protect more imperiled creatures as part of the same.
Yes. Well, we're concerned about the environment. We're part of the environment. The ocean is very important to us, and any of the creatures in the ocean. The biodiversity is necessary, and so we have to make sure that everything that is in the ocean is protected. right now we're also concerned about our tuna, the number of tunas in our in our water.
Yes.
Not only because it's the main resource for us, it's what's keeping us revenue for our operation.
Right.
But also because we don't want it to be extinct. We want all the ocean creatures to be taken care of, and that includes sharks.
Yes. Oh, I have spent a great deal of time in the Pacific, but in Aotearoa in New Zealand, and I have never yet been able to get to the Marshall Islands.
You should come one of these
Perhaps
days.
Someday. Yes. It's all of the Pacific Islands just break my heart with their beauty. It's very special.
Yeah.
And I have to take a moment and ask you, well, two things. One about timing and urgency for climate change, but also, before I get to that, about you're the first woman president, yes?
Yes, at least for the Pacific Island, small island countries.
For anywhere in the Pacific Island countries. Oh!
Yes.
Congratulations.
So I'm very honored to be chosen the first one. It's an opportunity, and it brings quite distinction to the Marshall Islands.
Well,
and I'm glad that I'm able to bear that for the people, and especially for the young girls.
Yes, of course. And one last word, if I may, talk to us about the urgency of this, because I know that of course there's many signatories to the Paris Agreement, and I know that it has to undergo ratification in different countries, and that people are moving on that. But the urgency, the speed is absolutely to the point to realign emissions targets, isn't it?
Yeah, well, we live the effect of climate change every day. The Pacific Island countries do, and Marshall Islands being one of those countries. It's a sense. The sense of urgency cannot be underscored for us, and I think that's why the first ratifiers, 3 of them, came from the Pacific Island countries, because we're all concerned about this. I think we're already too late in some sense, and there is no time to waste. We really have to move on with the ratification and with the implementation of the Paris Agreement.
Yes, of course. I mean, other countries worry about perhaps their coastlines or their shorelines, but the Pacific Island countries, and the smaller ones, particularly so low-lying, they worry about their existence at all.
Yes, so not only the 3 of us, but I guess a total of 15 other countries ratify early. And so we're very thankful for for the support from all these other countries, and we're hoping that this week all the activities and spotlight on this Paris Agreement will help move other countries to get their government or their processes to kick in and get the Paris Agreement ratified.
We hope so, and we will do everything possible to help make it so. Each of the listeners in an individual way, writing their governments, pressuring for time. It's one small blue planet, and it's our only home. Thank you so much, President Heine. Komo tata. Thank you for being with us, and for everything that you do at the helm of your country, and for leading the way on saving our planet.
Thank you so much for the opportunity, and jara.
And now it's time for the Surrealism Corner. Two items today. The first, deadly serious. The House Armed Services Committee recently refused to pass the Spire-Vesey amendment to the National Defense Authorization Act. This means that women who serve in the military and their family members are going to continue to be denied access to abortion care in military treatment facilities. I mean, this is appalling. Accessing abortion care off base while stationed overseas in service is often not possible. For example, one of the letters that was read in testimony to the committee went like this. I'm a member of the armed forces currently serving in Afghanistan. I'm here with my husband and unaware that the pills I take to prevent malaria can counteract my birth control pills. My husband is as shocked as I am. We do not want a child now. We have a job to do here. Due to the military's non-abortion policy, I'm pretty desperate. It isn't like you can go off base here, and you can't just say you need medical leave without saying why. So, in other words, if you're a woman in the military, you are permitted to die for your country or kill for your country, but you're not permitted to abort an unwanted pregnancy, and you're not permitted to get legal help to do that. So you are permitted to die in a botched abortion. This is surreal and appalling. What is also surreal in a humorous way, although a really scary one, is Carly Fiorina this last week or so singing, I know two girls that I just adore, I'm so happy I can see them more, etc., singing very melodiously to Ted Cruz's daughters because she can get to play with them on the bus. Somehow her attempt at tenderness, which may be real, in the circumstances, struck me as really rather spooky and surreal. Time for another quick break here at Women's Media Center Live. I'm Robin Morgan, and we'll return in just a moment. If you're curious about science, we'll be returning, in fact, with a blogger whose pen name is Scicurious, and she's terrific.
You're listening to Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan.
And we're back again. Scicurious, that's spelled S-C-I and then curious, Scicurious. It's the pen name of Bethany Brookshire, who has degrees in physiology, in arts and philosophy, and in science in biology, and is now a science blogger, and a very popular one at that. Here's Bethany. Bethany, welcome to the program.
Thank you so much for having me.
You are a blogger, the blog Scicurious, which I love and am now addicted to, the science education blog for Eureka Lab, the web producer for Science News for Students, and what am I missing? I know there's at least 3 or 4 other things I'm missing.
Well, we, myself and my 2 co-editors, Christy Wilcox and Jason Goldman, published Science Blogging The Essential Guide back in March, and I also am a host once a month on the podcast Science for the People, which is a really, really awesome podcast. We've got 3 great, fabulous female hosts who ask lots of cool, hard questions of scientists. And right now I'm actually working on a crowdfunding campaign to make the education blog Eureka Lab a video series where we take demonstrations and turn them into actual experiments with lots of repetition and data analysis, all the things that students need to get them to ask and answer their own questions. Oh,
this is so cool. I mean, because science, as we know, is under assault generally by the crazy ultra-right, who don't believe in evolution and don't believe in global climate change, and and basically just don't have much of a mind to go with. But this is all amazing work, and you are one of those terrific people who have the talent for translating what can seem intimidating and arcane scientific concepts into language that the rest of us can understand and, in fact, thrill over. How did you get into this?
Well, thank you. I actually started in graduate school back in 2008, which was a really long time ago now. I was kind of having a rough time during my 3rd year of graduate school. I was really, we call it the 3rd year slump sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
where none of your experiments are working, and you begin to question why you ever did this, and it seems like a very poor decision.
Yeah.
And I asked a writer at Scientific American at the time if I could write for Scientific American. He did not laugh at me. He told me to start a blog.
Aha.
And at that time, I thought blogs were what you ate for breakfast. I didn't realize that there was a vibrant science blogging community. But when I found it, I realized this is great. And so I started blogging between 2 and 3 times a week, all the way through my PhD and through my postdoc. And here we are.
And you're sort of a generalist in science, or what is your specific focus? Because you blog on so many fronts.
I do. I used to focus almost entirely on neuroscience and pharmacology, which were my specialties when I was doing research. But now I've branched out a lot. The things I will not cover include physics, astronomy, and anything where I know I am 100% unable to make sense of it.
Well, that's all right. We've had some terrific women who are, in fact, focusing on physics and astronomy on this program. But we definitely need neuroscientists as well. Let's talk for a minute about sexism online, since so much of your work is online, and since we know that on 2 fronts, women in science are still, although we're making huge headways, we're still not always fully accepted. And also, since online, in a parallel way, any woman who can manage to make her opinions strongly felt is often trolled and attacked. Have you been a rare exception, or have you encountered some of that? What's been your experience?
I would say personally I have not encountered as much sexism as many of my colleagues. Many of my female colleagues, particularly my female colleagues who are also of color, have undergone some really horrible, horrible stuff. I have no idea why I've been spared.
Maybe it's the pen name Scicurious that they can't figure out. I don't know when it lands and when it doesn't. And in terms of, that's just the online part. In terms of STEM, you found a fairly easy pathway in?
I would say that no one's pathway. I would say mine was rather average. I was very fortunate that my graduate advisor was a woman, Sarah Jones at Wake Forest University, and she just owned it. It was never a question that she belongs where she is. She belongs as a professor. Yeah. I was surrounded by many powerful female graduate students and postdocs. I've always had a very supportive environment. And fields such as neuroscience, physiology, biology, there is really good representation of women in those fields, and I think that really helps a lot.
Oh, this has changed, and this is so wonderful. Because of course it was not always that way. We've always said you have to see it to be it, and obviously you as a young scientist seeing powerful presences who were women in science made a huge difference. And now you're doing that for others, because the education that you're doing, particularly for young people, is just dynamite. I mean, it's super stuff. Recently, we had as a guest on this program Dr. Paul Greengard from Rockefeller University, who, when he got his Nobel in neuroscience, used the money to set up a special foundation that would give grants to women in the biosciences.
A lot of people are pursuing it from various levels. So, for example, in younger children and teens, which is where I'm very focused these days, there's this test called Draw a Scientist, and they ask kids, what do you think a scientist looks like? And it used to be when you said, what does a scientist look like? Everybody would draw a white guy with Einstein fluffy hair.
Right.
And then they said, okay, well, we're going to show you some female scientists. And they brought in some female scientists, and the next thing you know, the kids were drawing women. And now, actually, there's been updates to the Draw a Scientist test, and scientists have continued to study it over time, and they found that women are more likely now to draw women. They draw themselves. as scientists. So a lot of that early exposure is very important. But I also think it's important at higher levels, when you look at hiring in science, hiring for graduate positions, lab manager positions, tenure track positions.
Sure.
It's important that the people doing the hiring, the already present scientists, recognize unconscious bias. And there's actually a couple of cool studies that have been going on showing that if you train people who are on job evaluation committees and say, hey, this unconscious bias exists, this is what it looks like, they hire more women.
Yeah.
They are aware of what's going on.
Well, that's encouraging. That's hugely encouraging. I mean, I as a layperson think that this will be regarded, unless we destroy the planet first, in many generations and millennia hence, this will be regarded as a golden age of science, it seems to me, with DNA and with gravitational waves and with the Hadron. Is it from within as incredible a period of discovery as it seems to those of us without?
Well, I'm actually no longer a practicing scientist. I'm a full-time science writer. But I do think it is exciting. That's one of the reasons I became a science writer, is I just love seeing all of these new findings. And many of them are these very tiny advances, just these, super tiny little steps forward in something really, really small. But it's all so exciting seeing the new technology that we have to work with. But at the same time, it's important to be careful. Science is done by people, and people are not always good. They're not always bad. They're often a little too ambitious for their britches. It's very important to keep that in mind. But I do think that we are in a wonderful time to do science. I just wish there was more funding so people could do more.
Yeah, well, that's almost every aspect of progress always in some way comes down to that. It's maddening. But the work you do is really important. Before we go, say how people can find you. Give the websites and the projects.
Well, you can find my science education blog, Eureka Lab, at Science News for Students and Society for Science and the Public. I also write the blog Scicurious, which is at Science News online. And I am also on the podcast Science for the People, which is at scienceforthepeople.ca. And my crowdfunding campaign is a rally campaign being run by Society for Science and the Public.
Yeah,
and my book is available on Amazon.
What is the name of the book?
Science Blogging, The Essential Guide. We pulled together 27 amazing authors, all of whom are fantastic scientists, science writers, science journalists, science communication experts, and they all contributed fantastic insights.
Oh, goody. What a goody read. And of course, she's obviously a notoriously lazy person, because otherwise, she would be doing things instead of just lolling about. Thank you. Thank you so much, Bethany, for the work that you do and for being with us on Women's Media Center Live. You go, girl.
Well, thank you very much. I really appreciate it.
And now it's time for our new little feature, We Won This. You remember that We Won This is to remind us that it shouldn't only be the failures that feel real. So this is a touching story. A young high school student named Zarifa Shalabi, who comes from a very conservative Muslim family, living just a few miles from San Bernardino, California, so they were terrified to go out of their house after the shootings a month or so ago. She has received the ultimate symbol of teen acceptance. She was crowned prom queen. And this happened only after her non-Muslim girlfriends campaigned for her and wore hijabs in solidarity. One said, we saw it as a chance to do something good, to represent something good. These were kids at Summit High School who were trying to prove that they don't have problems with Muslims and that they do have problems with bullying and with racism. So normally in a school of more than 2,000 students, only 4 girls typically wear the hijab. But the girlfriends mobilized and held balloons and passed out flyers saying, saying, "Don't be a baddie, vote for the hijabi." And they each wore a hijab to show their support for Zarifa. And she had fantasized, of course, about going to the prom, but, never could have imagined that it would be real. And so she began to mobilize to convince her family to let her go and wear very conservative garb. But in fact, on the night of the prom, she and a large group of female friends rode a school bus to the Dorothy Chandler Pavilion in Los Angeles and danced through the night. And she stood on stage and she wore her crown. But with the flowing fabric of the hijab, the crown wouldn't always stay put, so she spent a lot of the night letting her friends wear it. One of them, Savannah Smith, who called herself Zarifa's campaign manager, said, "We all felt like we had all won. It was so exciting." I thought to myself, well, I don't know that we can claim we won this, but in the long run we did, because frankly, I don't approve of prom queen and I don't approve of the hijab. I don't approve of women being urged and forced to cover up any more than I approve of women being urged and forced to uncover, as in pornography. And the hijab and porn are sort of two sides of the same patriarchal coin. All of that said, this is, in the long run, in the deeper run, about sisterhood. And I'm enormously touched by it. So, not too hot on the hijab, certainly not too hot on prom queenness, but this is one that I celebrate and that I think in the long run, feminism won. Time for one last pause here at Women's Media Center Live. I'm Robin Morgan, and I will return directly with some fighting words.
You're listening to Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan.
And welcome back again, this time to some fighting words. Well, I promised you that we would return to the woman card as accused by Donald Trump to Hillary Clinton because she actually noticed that she was born a female human being. I just thought I'd throw out some statistics about how privileged we are to have the woman card in order to play it. So just for the hell of it, here we go. Not only in the United States are our reproductive rights, our basic human freedom, to have control over our own reproductive systems threatened continually. But let's look at us in public life. Women currently hold 4% of CEO positions at the S&P 500 companies. In government, the House of Representatives, women hold just 84 seats out of the 435. In the U.S. Senate, women are only 20%, and there are only 6 current U.S. governors who are female. In media, well, this is the Women's Media Center, mother of this program. So you know from hearing me before, things like men accounting for 83% of directors, executive producers, writers, cinematographers, and editors for the 250 most profitable films made in the United States. Women accounting for 17%, which is a 1 percentage point rise since 2013. Men account for roughly 74% of guests on major TV networks' Sunday morning news shows. Men were 69% of all TV news directors in 2014. And at Facebook, Google, and Twitter, as well as computer giant Apple, men account for 70% of the rank-and-file workers, on and on and on. Okay, let's look at women in the economy. Women earn 78.3 cents for every dollar a man earns. At the current rate, women will not receive equal pay until 2058. Millennial women experience depression 15.7% more days a year than millennial men. Men are 2.2 times more likely to work in STEM, science, technology, engineering, and math occupations than women. Let's just glance at violence and the women card. 18.3% of women in the United States, that's 1 out of 5, have survived a completed or attempted rape. Every 90 seconds, somewhere in the United States, a woman is sexually assaulted. Girls ages 16 to 19 are 4 times more likely than the general population to be victims of rape, attempted rape, or sexual assault. 73% of sexual assaults were perpetrated by a non-stranger. 17% were an intimate, and 8% were another relative. 1 in 5 adolescent girls become the victims of physical or sexual violence, or both, in a dating relationship. The Campus Sexual Assault Study estimated that between 1 in 4 and 1 in 5 college women experience completed or attempted rape during their college years. About 1/3 of female murder victims ages 12 or older are killed by an intimate partner. Domestic violence is the leading cause of injury to low-income women. The FBI estimates that only 46% of rapes and sexual assaults are even reported to the police, and less than half of domestic violence incidents are reported to the police. Sexual violence survivors exhibit a variety of psychological symptoms that are identical with those of victims of other types of trauma, such as war and natural disaster. The costs of intimate partner violence against women exceed an estimated $5.8 billion a year, and intimate partner violence causes U.S. women to lose about $727 million in wages from their approximately 8 million days of missed work. Factoring in unreported rapes, about 6% of rapists will ever spend a day in jail. 15 out of 16 will walk free. Those are just some samplings, and just from the United States. Let's widen our lens and look at the world and its woman card. Women constitute 2/3 of all illiterates and 90% of all refugee populations. Women are the majority of the elderly as well as the primary caregivers for the elderly. In the developing nations, we contribute over 50% of all food production, and on the African continent alone, we are over 80% of all farmers. But that labor is invisible in the GNP and GDP of the United Nations. In the industrialized nations, women form over 40% of the paid labor force, but are paid only 1/2 to 3/4 of what men earn at the same jobs. Women head 1/3 of all the families on Earth. Nowhere does our reproduction of the species count as being productive. We constitute the majority of the 20 million persons who die annually of hunger-related causes, and the 1 billion who endure chronic undernourishment from toxic and nuclear waste, acid rain, chemical warfare, and deadly pesticides, because such lethal pollutants take their first toll as a rise in cancers of the female reproductive system, and in stillbirths, miscarriages, and congenital deformities. Wherever we exist, we labor, as homemaker or mother, as prostitute or nun, but that work is erased because it's considered natural, and our work in farms, factories, or offices are marginalized because that's considered unskilled, transient, or migratory. In the real world here, our feet were bound to the size of 3 inches. We have been burned, and in some places still are, on the funeral pyres of our husbands. We have been murdered in infancy. The practice of female infanticide has risen recently in China. We have been set on fire as a witch in the 9 million stakes during the burning time in Europe, and we still suffer and die from child marriage and polygyny and abandonment, genital mutilation, gratuitous hysterectomies, forced concealment in purdah, forced exposure in pornography, food taboos specifically denying women protein, reserving it for males, and this is the reality of the woman card. You know what? It's not a Trump card. Then again, it's possible that Donald Trump doesn't know that he's a walking, breathing parody of patriarchy. Let's find out. Why don't we tweet him at Real Donald Trump and ask, do you know that you're a walking parody of patriarchy, or do you think you're the real thing? Or we could also ask, do you know, and then fill it in with any one of the statistics that I've just shared with you. And if you need to rehear them, you can go to iTunes and look up Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan, or you can go to WMCLive.com and replay them there. The point being to tweet at Real Donald Trump, at WMC Live, and hashtag WomanCard. Go for it. And that's it for today. This program is syndicated, but if you can't find the broadcast on a radio station in your area, you can always visit us at WMCLive.com. There you can find the show, plus the archive of all our previous episodes. And we're at iTunes worldwide. There you can stream, download, and subscribe to the show's podcast. Also, be sure to find WMC Live on Facebook and Twitter. Portions of this program were taped earlier. Opinions expressed here do not necessarily represent the WMC. Here's the family for Women's Media Center Live. Regina K. Scully is our founding sponsor. Julie Burton, Women's Media Center President, is executive producer. And I'm Robin Morgan, your producer and host. Thank you for being with us. Don't forget to join us next week right here on Women's Media Center Live.
For the smartest talk about news, politics, sex, books, religion, race, and more, tune your radio to Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan. Audacious, witty, provocative, informative, and fun. It's Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan on WMCLive.com. Talk radio with a brain.